What's up, guys? Pittsburgh White Shorts back again. Today, we are going to do the Summer Pockets deep dive roundtable discussion, whatever you guys want to call it. I'm joined today by Nico from Burn One.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Nico and I have done a lot of testing back and forth on what we think the best build of SMP is post Reflection Blue. The list has changed a lot. As you all probably already know, I'm a massive Summer Pockets fan. Nico also really likes the set. So we just wanted to share our findings, sort of discuss, sort of kind of like the deep dive video I did for Del Segno, why we chose certain cards over other cards, what cards were considered, and what our final builds were. We have a couple, actually, that we want to talk about. And then there's, of course, you can tune them to your personal preferences, stuff like that when we get there. But, yeah, I think we can just jump right into it here with wasting no time. We're going to talk about the finishers, like the big draws, the things that like really drew people in when spoilers were coming out. And of course, we can't start anywhere other than the level 3 Shiki.
Man, I
I don't
remember when
think.
this card was released, dude.
Yeah.
Or when they first spoiled this card, everybody was going bonkers.
Yeah.
But then somebody specifically, I remember them saying, it's like, but it gets destroyed by anti-burn, and then Bushiroad almost immediately clarified this doesn't get affected by anti-burn, and everybody freaked out again.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with what the Shiki does, it's a come and play top check X, so look it up to 5, add any card, so digs for her own climax. And then she's actually a 3-2, but she's an 11k, she only has 1 soul. We'll get to that. But then on attack, you can pay 1, and as long as she has 3 or less soul when you attack, all of your attack becomes instances of burn 1. So if you trigger swing for 3, it'll burn 1 3 times, and they can't anti-damage it or like anything. Well, you can money counter it, but you can't
Yeah, it's not
anti-burn it.
impacted by anti-burn.
So it doesn't Charlotte won't dodge it or anything like that.
Charlotte, Shiroe, if people still play Log Horizon.
Yeah. And then it has this 1/1 support that can give up to 2 of your Shikis a soul. So that'll make it a 3-2 so that if you have to swing into an open lane, you aren't punished because you just won't assign the soul. That's all optional. But your opponent can't really like deny it in any way other than like a money counter or something like that. So very consistent, doesn't require reverse, anything like that. It's off choice trigger. Choice trigger is really good for the shells that we ended up playing because the stock refund helps since you want to play some events and stuff, and we'll get to that. And
even the hand refund helps though, just because a lot
yeah,
of the time, even when you trigger choice, you have a really good early play that we can get to later and talk about there.
yeah,
And almost always are just we'll consider adding if you trigger it.
yeah, just a really good trigger. How it ended up for the deck, and if you don't already know already, so if you give this card a soul and then you play the climax, so you swing in for 3 into a lane where it's something across from it, and if you happen to trigger an additional soul or an additional 2 soul, if you're crazy enough to play stock soul, you will burn 1 4 times or 5 times, which can be pretty crazy. There's a way to, because Shiki is a top check X, you can use your Shikis to mill down to the bottom 1 or 2 cards of your deck, depending on how exactly you want to do it. Then you can play the Shizuku from the booster, which shuffles 2 cards back from your deck and gains a soul. So you can shuffle back soul triggers and increase your chances to swing for that 4 burn ones. Doesn't have as much reach as like people were like touting it and stuff like that. It's more of a super consistent closer from like 3-0 to 3-2. Even 3-0 can be a little dicey.
I think 3-0 is actually a little too dicey. I think 3-1 is like bare minimum where
Yeah.
you kind of want to guarantee it. And that's like, I think 3-1's like with the Shizuku.
Yeah.
And then 3-2 is kind of like just the more consistent way to go about it.
Yeah, 3-2, they're basically always dead. Especially if you can go for the Shizuku play where you shuffle back. But yeah, just didn't end up being as insane as everybody was like freaking out about when they revealed it. But I think the best part about the card is that she doesn't have a large investment to play. She's like 10 cards, right? Like your color fix is like Rize. You play 2 of the like 1/1s and 4 of the finisher, and then like the climax. So like
Yep.
10, 14 cards, depending on if you consider Climax as like a card.
Yeah. And then you also have the option to run the early play Fumio if you really wanted it. You also have the option to run the Musashi. Your good anti-change counters in yellow. You have a 2/1 stock bomb in yellow. So you
Mhm.
still have like other cards you can augment to help with the color fix. And you have drop searches and stuff too, which you can put
Yeah.
into your deck.
There's a drop search in every color except green now. In Summer Pockets, if you're lucky enough to get that $25 Shiki drop search, the red one. Thankfully, you don't need that for anything, but very funny. But yeah, we can move on to the other finisher that I think people were, at least people that we were talking to, were hyped for pre-release, which is this Miki, which is basically the Goblin Slayer finisher, but with a cuter character. And then, so she's on play heal, and then she has on reverse, your opponent burns one, and then you top deck that card, so your opponent puts that card that you just reversed on top of their deck, so it makes your successive swings more likely to hit. Has really cool interaction with this card that goes to memory, that is also a requirement for it to get an additional 1,000 power cross turn and anti-backup. So a little bit better than the Goblin Slayer. They can't just like deny it or anything, because your opponent at least can't play power backups. They can still play events, but they won't be able to stop it from swinging in. They'll swing it in 11 as long as you have this in memory. And then the coolest part about this card is actually the memory card. So we're going to call this the Biker Boy because it's got Hyri and Miki on the bike. So for every copy of the Biker Boy you got in memory, at the beginning of your Encore step, you can pay 3 and ditch a card to burn one and then salvage a card. Or a character, rather. So what you can do is you can use that in conjunction with the Miki herself so that when you get a reverse and that card goes to the top of the deck, you guarantee a burn one. So it can output, like, realistically, you can actually get like 5 pings off this if you try field it and you have like the right board. It's a lot of resources, but like it can happen. There's a 3/2 Miki that like gets markers on play that you can use like once per instance of the effect to like fulfill an additional stock. So you only need 1 floating after you played all your Mikis since the effect is free. And that's the big part about it, is that Miki's completely costless, like on her own. Mostly because like the Biker Boy and stuff is sort of cost up front because it's a pay 1. You have to send it to memory, removes itself from the board. But yeah, it's I think the combo is good, but I think the on reverse is probably the worst part about the card.
I think in the current metagame, I'm really inclined to agree because a lot of the boards, I'm specifically thinking of like the problem decks, I would say like DeCapo and stuff, tank up really big at level 3.
Yeah,
So
way beyond what you can climb, unless you like.
This like ends up being a little awkward.
You'd have to like give up an attacker. They do have a good pump at 0 to support this card. It's a Shizuku. It's like an on play give 1,000, on attack give 15 or something. But then you're giving up a lane to do this, and like the whole part of it is that it's costless. You should be able to like double or tri-field it without having to worry. But then it's not big enough to get a reverse on its own. And Summer Pockets unfortunately doesn't have like 2k to fronts or like incidental power. Really, it's like honestly the best level X in the whole set is the Shiki that we just looked at, the 1/1 that's in yellow. So it'd be kind of weird to run that card with this card.
Yeah.
But which is pretty unfortunate for Summer Pockets, but the card's definitely still a great option. Being just another healer, we're going to get into the whole healing thing. Healing's pretty important for Summer Pockets now. They're a really massive part of their strategy, so just jamming another 4 healers in your deck is really strong.
This just as a side note though, this card can actually get a little bigger than what you typically think it would be, especially if you run the green package. Just because if you actually like start to puppet power and then you also put behind like some sort of a level support. Obviously, you're not going to play the 1/1, but you have some other level support options you can put behind this.
Yeah.
And since without backup, your opponents can't do too much. And to give an example with DeCapo, for instance, Miki top decks, so the card is removed from the board, so their global power is gone, so your other lanes will get easier reverses afterwards.
Yeah, so there are ways to leverage it. It's just needing the reverse from the outset, at least for me. I think that's what pushed me.
It makes it a little more difficult in this particular metagame.
That's what pushed me towards Shiki, because of course everybody can do the obvious thing where they just start crashing out at going into their finisher turn if they're not going to go to level 3 first or something like that. And then yeah, your healers, but what if you're at 3-0 or something? So, when you're playing an on-reverse finisher, these are the kinds of things that you have to keep in mind. Thankfully, this is also a heal, though, so not a dead card. It's like a healer 10k.
And I guess another kind of like good note we can mention, it is on a gate trigger, which is always really nice.
Door's really good all the time. Just always a good trigger. Every deck that we'll see, I guess if you consider standby, I guess like they're all plussing triggers for the most part. So yeah, no more no plussing trigger decks. No more wind, I guess. But that's a bit of a spoiler. We'll get to that. So moving on, after the finishers, we're going to talk about the level 0 lineup. We're going to start with the field pluses. Similar to how I did with the last segment video, we're gonna break these up into like sort of groups and move through them. But we'll start with level 0 field pluses. Really important for Summer Pockets, mostly because of the profiles. Yeah, the profiles that they got, because before, I mean, y'all have heard me complain about it. I think everybody who's played Summer Pockets complain about it. Relying on Umi for like color fix and field plus is just like the worst feeling in the world. The Umi coin flip. So thankfully, we don't have to play that one anymore. There's no reason to play the Samugi Freerunner. We did get 2 new oversized options. There's a 2 or less stock Umi in yellow, the 4K, and the Miki 4K, which is just, I believe, you can't play events or backups. Your opponent has pay 2 encore.
No, it's your opponent. You can't play events or backups.
Which is relevant for you, because you do want to play events in Summer Pockets. However, it's also relevant that it's a Miki name, because that Biker Boy we just talked about from the, you have to have 2 or more Noma keys on board for that ability to proc at Encore phase. So it's important that you have an option at level 0 for just like a Noma key card you can throw down to fulfill that condition. But the most important card is the Clean Cut. This is like the field plus profile that Summer Pockets desperately needed to function. This card is so important. I don't think I've played a like single deck that doesn't run 4, and like I really hate playing like clean cuts even when I'm playing 4 standby, and I still do it in that because like the card's just so important.
This card is like really good in the deck. I it's kind of weird to say it, but I think this card fixed like the majority of the issues SMP had at level 0.
Yeah, for sure. It took SMP 0 from just like you're kind of waiting until you can get to level 1 and like you can start actually playing the game, because you like really weren't doing much. You were kind of praying your coin flip would hit and that you could like move on. And even in the bar decks and stuff like that, you were just like puking Kamome Rickies to the field and like waiting, like trying to clock yourself to 1 so that you could put down your bar support, even if you were playing like 8 bar or win bar or something like that. So yeah, this card really just fixed a lot of problems. So it's Rem Clean Cut. So on play, you reveal top. It gets 1500 power and a level for the turn if you reveal a character. The reveal has really good synergy late game, like obviously with the Shiki finisher. If you're only going to play 2, you can check to see if there's a soul trigger on your first attack, swing in not that lane first, and then swing with your other card there, or depending on if there's a soul trigger or not. Helps you sequence your attacks correctly. Because we're going to play the photos event we get to, the 3500, can like actually get reverses later in the game, because we're going to slowly like buff our board by increments of 500. And like we can tap down our 1/1 support to give it like additional 500, so we have like small incremental amounts of power, but enough to like sort of snipe stuff with the clean cut to get pluses. And the most obvious synergy, the card that you want to clean cut the most, the Shiroha, does have Surveil on play, so you can make sure that you get your power, which is really nice. But yeah,
I think switching to like a more aggressive style at level 0 is actually like helps the deck a lot.
Yeah, it really does.
I think it switched from like a pseudo defensive type of deck, because you're trying to just originally you were just trying to wall up with your Shirohas, to now you're just kind of like tri-field, and at least in our builds mainly, you're like tri-field and wanting to slam and like re-slam bar every turn.
Yeah, you're just trying to keep up the aggression while generating like as much memory and resources to go for the biggest finisher that you can, like more traditional, like quote unquote traditional Weiss deck, I guess, where like you're building resources into your finisher. At least until you hit the level 2, things can change up there. You can get a little bit more defensive there. But yeah, I agree with Nico, and after talking about it a lot, I think that in every single Summer Pockets deck, you run like 4 clean cut. It's just too good for every deck. Moving on, we talked briefly about Ricky's. So there's two main options. So you have the green one, the made one. It's a deck search on reverse. You pay one, clock yourself, and then this goes to memory. You can search only pirates, but you can search anything of any level. And then there's the blue one, which is on play, mill 2. If you hit a climax, you can mill your opponent's top card of their deck and then put any card from their waiting room top of their deck. So you can like mill a CX and like put a clean card on top, or like force them to cancel, or whatever you want, really.
Yeah.
And then it's a salvage Ricky for level 1 or lower only. I was pretty confident going into spoiler season that in our initial testing, that every deck was going to play this blue Kamome Ricky because of how it interacted with some of the other level 1 combos and stuff like that. But damn, I was wrong. The card wasn't good before, and it's not good now either. So it's unfortunate. Not terrible.
He's actually become the MVP.
Yeah, the made Ricky's been so good, especially in the decks, because of the level 1 combos we choose to play, it basically just becomes a tutor for our level 1 combo. But even then, it's fine, because it's a memory Ricky. It deletes itself from the game. Unfortunately, like we have up on the slide here, there's some minus 500 power effects in the meta. But usually, even when that happens, you don't care too much.
It sucks, but you're not like...
Yeah, it doesn't destroy your game plan.
Yeah.
Think of it as like extra copies of your like level 1 combo pieces, more so like a card that's gonna like you could like use later or something like that. It's like it's your green level, your go-to green level later, and then your tutor for your level 1 combo. Keeps up your consistency, helps you try field, basically helps you keep up hand. The blue Ricky just has like every game I would play it, I could point back to that turn and be like, damn, if I played down any other card, would have been better, because like I didn't get anything useful off it because it was salvaged. It was too early, and because it had to die, so I had no control over like really what I was getting. Like an on-play salvage Ricky just has some problems. Pretty unfortunate.
I'm pretty sure the salvage Ricky is also for level 1 or lower.
Yeah, it is level 1 or lower.
That hampers it a lot, and then just
you can't take anything.
The mill 2 like do nothing effect sucks.
Yeah, even if it gave power, it'd be better. It just doesn't do anything. Like, unfortunately. Best part about the card, the SR is really good. SR is really, really cool. You can't see it in the art here. It's got, like, music notes all over it. It's awesome. But, unfortunately, Green Ricky ended up being the play. Moving on to our hand filtering and tutoring tools. We got a lot. So, like we said before, there's a drop search in every color. But the red one's, like, pretty inaccessible. The main ones you're going to have are the Draw Deck Kamome in blue, and the Shiroha Maid, which is in yellow. They're literally the same card. We have the Shiroha on reverse Rize, where on play you can take a copy of it and put it into memory as long as you have 2 or less memory. So it's a like on reverse Rize that like deletes itself from your deck, which is pretty cool. Ends up being a staple yellow fix in most decks. I guess we can talk about it here since we don't really have a like slide dedicated to it, but the card's pretty important because like the normal thing with on reverse Rizes is like they're dead cards later, like you don't really want to use them later because the timing is bad. But on first deck they're good, and if like you delete a copy or 2 from your deck, it becomes less of a liability to run the card.
Yeah.
So like because it slowly removes itself, it's probably one of the best like on reverse Rize options you can play.
Like really good mill options on your first deck, which is I think one of the big things Summer Pockets lacked initially.
Yeah, because once you get to your later decks, like you're compressed enough, or like one brainstorm, things like that, and like sitting on some heals is like more than enough. Or even if you have to like crash one of these in at that point, you're like in a situation where it doesn't really matter anymore. But yeah, for first deck, I think it's invaluable to just sort of mill you through there. We have some drop salvage options. We have the new Shizuku. When it becomes reversed, you can like pay 1 and send it to memory, or it just goes to memory. Yeah,
that just goes to memory. If
you have 2 or less, it works with some other Shizuku cards that unfortunately didn't pan out as being that great. The whole sort of Shizuku Tsumugi package from Reflection Blue, after some initial smoke testing, turned out to be really not worth exploring that much. So we sort of wrote it off at that point. There might be something there, but. The other one we have is the Owl one, which you mill 2 and gains 1,000 for every Summer Pockets character, and it's in a slightly more relevant color in red. So if you wanted a drop salvage option, that's probably what you'd go for, is the Owl one. Especially it can hit over things at level 0. 2 options for Climax Ditch Salvage, green and blue. The Kamome gets an additional 1,000 power if you have 2 or more other characters. So whatever you want to run, both are zeros, doesn't really matter, whatever color is more important. And then we have the MVP, the Tsumugi Photos Bonder, which we have a whole slide for
this
here.
This card of all cards is like the MVP.
Yeah, this card has always been strong. I remember, I think the first time I ever really messed with this card was when I was like brewing like decks for our old Christmas event, and like I ended up playing like Barred Door for that with like just set 1 Summer Pockets, and like this card immediately stood out as being like extremely strong. And like made a real deck for it. I think Nico has some like gameplay video, like commentary on Burn One's channel you can check out that like uses this
you
card.
Were actually in that commentary.
Yeah, I was in that commentary. Yeah, so this card, what it does, like Nico said, big MVP for the deck. The big thing, because like the big reason why this has on play, if like you're familiar with how like the pastel palette stuff works, you can like on play swap the bottom card of your clock with any character from your grave. So it has synergy with the event, what we'll get to in a second, but that does let you like manipulate your color in main phase. Since like if you're running low on yellow or blue or some color you're trying to splash, it can like really help you fix. And then of course also that makes your photos event, which are pay 1, grab any character from clock, add it to hand, clock yourself, and the event goes to memory. That turns your photos event that this card also ditch bonds to into a delayed drop salvage. So it just gives you on-demand grave access, where your drop salvage is also banishing itself, going to memory. Oh, and by the way, the photos, when they're in their memory, 500 extra power to your board on your turn for every event you have. So if you resolve 4, that's an extra 2k to your board every single turn. Yeah, card is pretty good.
I think the other thing that we can also mention here is we call this a delayed drop salvager, but this is also potentially costless hand filter. So if you're kind of like flooding on climaxes, you don't really need, like, if you're playing the package, you don't really need to even consider running like the drop salvagers or like the drop CX salvagers, just because this one kind of like already fills in that slot and it has other like kind of like better auxiliary effects along the
way. Yeah. Like it also enables this 1/0 stalker. This is 105k. It's the stalking effect is active cross turn so long as the event's in memory. So it doesn't work without the event, so if you're going to use it for a stalker, it's a 5500 stalker with no downside. Which is, I think this is like the best possible profile for a stalker that like you can have. It's really good. I think I found it to be even better than Act. Like your opponent can't even crash the lane if you put stuff out there because you generate stock, which of course, you know, makes your 1/1 events free. So yeah,
in the suboptimal games your opponent has, your typical level 1 board is going to usually consist of like 2 of your combo and 1 of this card if you're playing like the bar for the level 1.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't clear every single card, you give them like a hell of a decision because they're like, shoot, do I have to leave like a level 1 combo up, or do I have to like
crash a stalker?
Or do I even crash this character into a stalker? Yeah, like forcing your opponent to make those, like forcing your opponent into those types of decisions helps a lot too. Just because it gives them the extra opportunity to make mistakes.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only bad part about these packages of cards is that Tsumugi is on them. Like, the biggest neg is that we're forced to run so many cards with Tsumugi on them. Like
Pringles.
Yeah, the Pringles. Don't talk about the Pringles. You can give me nightmares. I have nightmares about the Pringles. We're sorry out there to anybody who really loves Tsumugi, but that route was painful. I cannot... All right, moving on.
Made me want to quit the game.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So we're going to get into our level 1 combos. They're all kind of oof. Nico threw together the slide. He called it like these are all oof, and I was like, yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They all have problems one way or another. I'll go through the ones that we like decided not to play first. So the Miki bag, cute. But after a couple games with it, I instantly dropped it. I don't know if you did any power with playing with this. It's on play Maguro, so on climax play you Maguro.
Yep.
Kinda weird.
Yeah.
Trigger wasn't doing anything because and people will go like, oh, like you said, choice was good for the deck. Yeah, choice is good for the deck. specifically because you get to make the choice of hand or
Yeah.
stock. When you don't get to choose, the bag doesn't really do a lot. And then like the combo's not really very recurable, so yeah, easiest one to drop. Shiroha at the time that we were testing, level down My Little Shido was still a thing, which like I think in my opinion made Shiroha almost unplayable. Now that My Little Shido is on a restriction list, Shiroha becomes an option again. The Wind and the Shiki finisher, like the Wind choice, has some natural synergy. The deck is almost like build itself. Like you slam all the cards in the deck that you need, and then you look down and you have no slots left. Which is the main problem with Shiroha. I feel
like that was the biggest problem when I tried to build Wind choice was like Shiroha by itself is 8 slots, not counting the
cards
naturally. Shiki by itself is like 6 slots, ideally 7. So
you run out really fast.
Yeah.
And like this was always the problem with Shiroha and Summer Pockets, is that Shiroha was so good, but Summer Pockets always had good cards that were worth playing and like good card packages, and you couldn't even consider playing them because Shiroha ate 8 slots, and you had to play a bunch of cards to like enable Shiroha to function, so that you could like play as many Shirohas as possible. So like Shiroha ended up being like a 16 card package minimum of like cards to like get into Shiroha and play Shiroha and keep Shiroha alive. So you just like didn't have any slots to do anything. So Shiroha, both for the level down reason and then after that the slots reason, was dropped. The other one that people were pretty hype on when the spoilers were going around was this Umi combo. The Umi combo is 7k on turn, I think. It's like always 7k, right? 7k on turn, not on Climax play. Which is a 7k on turn, and then on reverse with the door, you can salvage a character, so just Marika, but then after you salvage a character, you can choose to ditch a character. Character is important. You salvage either another character or an event named Summer Pockets. There are 3 events named Summer Pockets. There's a red camera, just a straight up camera. It's not a backup, which is very important. There is a 1/1 mask, which is the 1/1 go to memory, search your deck for a Summer Pockets character. That's blue. And then there is a 1/1 Operation Tornado that goes to memory that I believe gives 2k.
It's Operation Tornado, but it costs 1 stock.
Yeah, it's a 1/1 Operation
Tornado. 2k, yeah.
1/1 2k, and then Operation Tornado. I think this was the thing everybody thought was going to be great because we were seeing so much memory stuff, so much stuff that enabled memory. People were thinking it's like, oh, well, like you can use Umi, you can like get the mask, and then it turns your salvage into like a reactive option and a proactive option. It's like, or you can go for the mill, which like quote unquote will fix your like first deck mill problems. And then people say like, oh, well, like the tornado's really good on first deck and it goes to memory, and you know none of those things worked out. The thing that worked out the best was the camera, but the camera has this cool problem where because it's not a backup, because it's not a torch, the deck speed that it gives you, because it's 1 turn delayed, is not enough to like leverage that deck manipulation in a way that's meaningful. You would rather have a combo that mills any amount on attack or on play. So it just ended up not working. Also, generally getting a reverse at level 1 at that time, and even now for different reasons, is still hell on earth. You had JC, Obero, like all sorts of shit. Standby. Like everything was against you, even with this card swinging in at 8k. As it turns out, the power didn't really matter. But yeah, so unfortunately, Umi at that point was dropped. The other combo, before we get into the 2 green ones, which by this point you can probably realize we went with one of those, is the Al Shimakaze. So the Al Shimakaze is actually from the original Summer Pockets trial deck. It's just a normal on reverse search Shimakaze off of Pants. Pants does have a soul trigger, has a bit of synergy with the choice finisher because obviously it's adding 4 more soul triggers to your deck, which is just a small thing there. And then also it has this new deck bonder where it's a 500 power card that gives Apple Bond power cross turn to this card. So it makes this card a 6k or a 7k if you play 2 of them. And it has ditch a red or blue card on play, search this Al Shimakaze from your deck. You just get to run like 7-8 copies of the card. And like you just get to rip it out of your deck, and then when it searches, it also rips another card out of your deck. So like it compresses your first deck too, when you tutor it, which is like a really cool interaction. It's really selective, which like the other combos that we were considering at the time weren't. When you don't combo, it is walling, sort of kind of like how Shiroha used to. The decks that you end up playing in end up playing similar to how Shiroha was, but it's like a smaller, costless wall, but you're still walling up. Unfortunately, the package in blue, when you were playing blue, you were incentivized to run a bunch of other cards, and then the deck didn't have space for the other cards, and dropping green was too much of a liability. We ended up really wanting green. So Owl didn't work in the quote-unquote meta best list, but the Owl combo is still very good because it
I don't want to
up.
trash this combo a little too much, but I do think it falls into the same trap that the Umi combo does.
Yeah, to a point.
You need a reverse, and a lot of the times, if you're playing like fairly competitively, in the meta, it can be kind of hard to find a reverse with all the different like Oberos and stuff running around, and just stand by, just saying no.
It does wall when you don't combo, which is like the only feather it has.
That is a very good, yeah.
Yeah, it lets you play defensively on the swing back, which none of these combos other than the Shiroha do, which is why I have these two grouped.
I don't actually know your experience too much with this. I felt like the good couple games I had with like this is my go-to level 1 combo. If my level 1 board was fully answered, I felt like I lost the game.
Yeah, if you cannot win a single lane cross turn when you're playing this, your strategy falls apart because you've invested too much sculpting and like deck slots. You've dedicated too many deck slots to supporting the card. And then when you're playing it, you've dedicated too much sculpting you've had between 0 and 1 to the card. So you don't have anything to follow up with if you don't like keep a lane or two. So yeah, I would agree. But because of all those factors, we focused on sort of refining the combos of choice, which were both bar. There's the old Kamome, which is a 6/5 on turn. So 7/5 with the climax. And then on attack, you reveal top 2. Your opponent chooses a character or event from among those cards, puts it in your hand. Yeah. That's it. So your opponent chooses, and it mills. So card mills 2 on attack, and then the attack. So it goes through 3 cards on attack with the climax combo. Swings in at 7/5. Important. Important to remember that. The new Kamome is a on play, gains Yuki power, counting itself for Summer Pockets characters. So sort of warps your on play sequencing a little bit, but whatever. So it can also get to 6/5 before climax, 7/5 with climax if you play it last. And then this one must clear its lane or not have an opponent, but either has to get a reverse or swing into an open lane. And then at the beginning of your encore step, you draw 1, and then if you choose to draw an additional card, you must then ditch a card. So you can draw 2, ditch 1, or you can just draw 1. So the mill is a little bit more controllable with the other Kamome, the drawback being it needs to be a lane that has been won or a lane that was empty. And I think Nico and I both ended up going for set 1 Kamome at the end of the day because of the on-play power. I think that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
That we would get to.
Can also, believe it or not, the 4K to 4/5 on defense power threshold is actually pseudo-relevant.
It came up in every single game.
Yeah.
Every single game, because set 1 Kamome was 4K. My opponent would be like, "Oh, I can tie it." Or set 2 Kamome is 4K. "Oh, I can tie it, thank God." And it would go out and be like, "Damn, if I was playing set 1 Kamome, I would have randomly plussed in that lane." And like the thing with it, and I can move at this point to our specific slide for these 2 cards, is that the selectivity between the 2 is like negligible. For like the deck that you're playing, especially because like the other one can also add events. If you like reveal climax and reveal an event, you have to take the event. Your opponent doesn't get to choose. So if the upside to the other Kamome, the one that draw 2 ditches one, is that if you reveal or draw into a climax, you can ditch the climax. If you revealed the climax, what was the difference there? The only real benefit is that you can choose to not draw in an additional card. So you can trade the true on-attack nature of an on-attack climax combo for a pseudo-undeniable climax combo that is not recurable if it randomly lives, It is worse with clean cut because if you clean cut it back, it doesn't get big the next turn. Unlike Set One Kamome, Set One Kamome is always massive. And then the other thing with Set One Kamome is because she's 6'5" base, she starts to spiral out of control with the photos events, and like can like randomly answer cards at level 2 that like don't keep cross turn power because she's like so big as a costless card. So the benefits of the Set One just sort of like on the board and like the power like sort of outweighed any sort of benefits with the mill and like the quote unquote quality of the plus, which in my opinion they're the same. A lot of people will argue that the draw 2 ditch one is better, but and you know it very well might be, but in practice they end up being very very similar for the decks that they're in.
Felt that a little bit here though, just because I feel like a lot of the times, so when I'm playing like the Set One Kamome, I can feel like I can snipe like the quote unquote shitter lanes and not like the problem lanes with my Tsumugi and get free stock on top.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm playing Set 2 Kamome, I have to take into consideration of like, okay, well, do I like perhaps like walk into a counter here and then I get denied my pluses off of the Kamome? It's like, what at that point I'm forced to kind of like make that choice and be like, what do I want? Do I want the draw 2 or do I want the stock? And a lot of it's like it's one of those choices where I don't think I want to make that choice. I'd rather just
I'd rather. And to me, my problem with Yuki power, like that sort of on-play power profile, is that I think it warps my like how I play cards out of my hand like too much to a certain point. When it's as broken as actual Yuki, it's worth playing around. But I really hate that power on play effect. Really destroys the way you take your turns sometimes, or forces you to play turns inoptimally.
To kind of bring another point to kind of like what you made earlier, clean cutting this 1-0 combo sometimes, like if you don't have the stalker or whatever, you're just kind of like having a suboptimal turn. Clean cutting this combo just so you can use it again the next turn feels so good, and your opponent usually feels so bad when you do it.
Yeah,
so I don't think that should be discarded. It's actually a really really good line of consideration, or good line of playing to consider about.
Yeah, it's a play that can help you actually come back into the game. Whereas if you did it with the other combo and did the same thing, you have a 4K, and you didn't win a lane last turn, so you're probably not winning a lane with a 4K either. 5K with Climax.
Well, you're also not plussing from that card because you can still slam bar with just like with this and then cut it back. So
it really comes down to that the Set One Kamome is a card where when I am playing a bar level 1 Climax combo, I am saying that I would like to recur my Climax combo throughout the game whenever I happen to coincidentally draw it, and that I have these cards on the field. And the Set 1 Kamome just does that so much better than the Set 2 Kamome. So we both went with that one. Card's good. Kamome's a good girl. So
I think both you, Kid, and a couple of other people said this when I just talked to you guys about the set in general. The Set 1 Kamome doesn't really have too much of a downside if your deck building is like fairly decent.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times you're asking your opponent, would you like a punch to the face or a kick to the balls?
Yeah, I do to a certain point agree with that, but like at the end of the day, it's still bad selectivity.
Yeah,
I just think that when people say it's like this is somehow inherently worse than like Moguro or like any of these other on attack pluses that aren't selective, it's probably a little bit better than those rather than being worse. So, all right, we can move on here. Let's move into our level 2. So this is where things really start to change for Summer Pockets. So before, when we were playing Summer Pockets, we were riding out Shiraha. It was sort of over-centralizing our game from like level 1 all the way to level 3 because we didn't really do anything except like maybe play some Umi healers back then. But now our sort of level 2 is very opened up and we can do a lot of things with it. And as it turns out, when we're playing green, what we're going to choose to do is heal. But I'm going to run down these cards one by one before we get into them. I'm going to do the ones that aren't the healers first. So we have this new Owl Bouncer. It's just an on-play bounce, 2 or less. And then you can also, if you don't have that level 0 eye in your memory yet by level 2, you can just put it in there for free as long as you have 2 or less memory. So it helps you get there for the old
really
combo.
Good art.
Yeah, it has the strongest art in the set. And then we also have the old Umi healer, which is it's a 2 or less, and then on play, You have to have 2 or more time characters. That's hard now. So it ended up being not the healer of choice for decks that are not continuing to run Shiroha, because when the 2-1 Shiroha stays around, you're fulfilling your time condition. Moving on to counters, we have the old 2K counter, the old anti-change counter, which is a pay 3 sack counter. And then we have 2 new counters here. We have I'll do the event counter first. That's just money counter. Gives an additional 1,500 play. It does have full field condition. Unfortunately, pretty rough. I wish it didn't give power and didn't have full field condition, but it is what it is, and it's in green. We are playing green, so you can choose to play this. You'd have to play a lot of copies of it, since we don't have real ways to rip into events. But other than the Shiki, but you want to use your Shiki when you're going for game, not for trying to live. And then the other one we have is just straight up tap counter. Just pay for it.
Just the solo profile from ReZero, if you're familiar with that.
Same
pay
thing.
For this one tap.
Really good for builds that are playing more defensively, which, because of these 2 healers, once we get to level 2, we now have the ability to do. So the first one, and we actually have specific slides for these, so I'm just going to move on. The first one...
Can I touch on the tap counter a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think after talking with you, I think I can kind of give in to the point where I don't think the tap counter is super, super great with Shiki. But I think the tap counter becomes really, really better with cards like Miki, like if you're choosing to run the Miki top end. Just because if you already know you're not going to kill your opponent that turn, instead of opting to potentially just pay 3 and burn them for like an additional just 1 damage or something, if you have this in hand, Miki's not very stock expensive. So you can, I'm assuming you're winning lanes with a Miki. So you can also hold this back behind them, so they'll only be able to get 2 attacks off that turn if they're not running hexproof. So that's also a really, really strong upside for the counter.
Yeah, it has a lot more synergy with the Miki top end since it's free, and you're not really building around, you're not playing your whole game to burn out with Shiki or whatever. You're playing more naturally, and because the other card's a healer, it's naturally stable, even if you don't go for the finisher that turn. So the tap counter becomes better in that deck. But yeah, moving on to our first early play healer here, we have the Tsumugi healer. It's an early play with 4 or more board. It's a stock healer, so you ditch a card, heal a stock, and then it swings at an 11-5 on your turn as long as you have 1 photos in your memory, which you're going to have by that point. The card's weak on defense, but as long as you have a level support in the back, it does sit cross turn at 10k if you want to try to defend it, if you were playing more of a backup oriented strategy and you still had green in your deck. It's just the perfect payoff card for playing green, because it lets you double heal with another early play, which is a 2 or less early play normal healer. We can just sort of spam heals with the best of them in Summer Pockets now, since it's light on stock. We're running choice, we're playing events, so we have some amount of memory, and then we're healing every turn. Since those are the 4 or more, we just play it again, stay at level 2 as long as possible. The card feels really, really disgusting because it always kills what's across from it, because this card starts to spiral out of control. You have the level X down, you have a couple events in memory, it's swinging in 14, 15 without climax, running things over. If Otome didn't have friggin' hand on core or whatever, this card would be a perfect answer to it, but unfortunately that's not the world we live in anymore. But yeah, card is extremely, extremely good. Probably one of the most important cards out of the new set.
Yeah. If I can also make a note, typically the finishers you're playing in the set don't have hand investment. They don't have on attack ditch or anything. So when you're playing this card, even when you start getting down to a lower hand, you're still feeling fairly fine, just because you don't have to overextend with your hand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Summer Pockets was always able to play on low card hands better than most decks, because it was tagging up with Shiroha, but now the other cards it has don't need a lot of hand either. So you don't feel bad about ditching down to continue to play a stock healer, or maybe even multiple stock healers every turn if you have to. You can really heal spam with the best of them. I know my locals has a lot of slime running around from when slime came out. So a lot of people have that set now. And I was more than keeping up with the heal spam loops with Summer Pockets in my more normal games. It's a lot of heal power. So, really important. Other important card for that is our 2 options for 2 or less just normal healers. The Umi, like we said, it is a memory heal, but we can't really fill that anymore. Puts us just towards the Shiki, which is 2 or less on play normal heal to grave, and then gets an additional 1,000 power if you're playing the game. So it's 10-5, 500 bigger than the Umi. I think that Nico and I can both agree the 500 power also ends up being pretty relevant cross turn all the time.
It's randomly relevant against like certain profiles. So like to give you a good example, Konosuba, if they play Aqua and then they slam a climax without the back row, they'll be swinging in a 12k, so they're tying this lane, and that feels kind of bad for them because then they're ditching a card to heal, and then they're losing that lane on top of it, where they kind of want to sit on that card for at least a turn.
Yeah, this card in front of a level X is like really good because more than likely it's gonna live back, and then it helps you fulfill your field condition for another green healer. So like that's why it starts to snowball, because you can really hold board with like either one counter or behind a level X where you're keeping this one lane and then you're continuing to play your 4 or less healer every turn. So it sort of feeds into that. Because this card is tanky, it lets you play more green healers, which is really good. But yeah, you're looking to double heal your first turn and then single hero every turn after that, and just continue to heal until your opponent is ready to die. Moving on to some additional level 3s, we have the option to play a couple things that we have here, some spicier than others. We have the Musashi, just a normal Musashi, and then it has on attack can give any Summer Pockets character 1500 power. Good synergy with both finishers, since like this is a good third lane. If you're gonna attack first, it's just another instance of damage. If you're trying to like push for game, since you sort of wait to play your Shikis anyway, and then it gives additional power to your Mikis to get reverses if you have to, while also presenting additional damage, since that combo also pings out for game. The Icy Tail, the Owl Icy Tail, I think we've talked about this card to death in many different videos, many different places. Card's insane. Unfortunately, blue is not a color that we ended up being in, but if you are in blue, the card is insane and should be run at least 2. Card's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just a draw 2, ditch 1, and then ditch 2 cards to Icy Tail, notably no stock cost. Because you're not spending hand, like Nico noted on other finishers, whether you're playing old finishers or new finishers, you will happily give up the hand to continue playing. I'll get to this Miki last, and then moving on, glossing over it for now, we have this Fumio. It is a early play 2 or less, right?
Early play full field.
Full field. So full field early play, and then it is a normal healer, and then it also has pay 2, 1 card Fumio. Really, really expensive, but it is an additional like additional healer. If for some reason you're not in green, you could play this as your 4 or more healer, but it's just more stock all around, and it sits really small. So,
you did forget to mention one other thing. So this is a Fumio, but you need a
that's right,
named character on the field. So we're not talking about the trait here. Specifically, most of the Summer Pockets named characters are the primary level 3s for all the characters. So like the Musashi is named Summer Pockets Shiroha. The Shiki finisher, same thing. So you need to have like one of your finishers or one of your like primary level 3s on the board for this to actually be able to Fumio your opponent for only one on top of that.
Yeah, the fact that it's only 1, the fact that it's so restrictive because I guess it's also on an early play healer couldn't be a good Fumio because it's attached to a heal. Just made it almost never worth it. But it could be a tech option if you want to throw it in for those games where you're doing really well and you have that extra stock overhead. It's not bad when the baseline is just a 4 or more healer, even if it is small.
You don't have any immediate, outside of like Icy Tail, you don't have any immediate tools to deal with like compression. So this is a good option because your only other tools is like a climax combo that you have to pay out on play. The Icy Tail, and yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, the Kamome I have here on the end, pretty spicy, but most builds now are in bar at level 1. So if you're in bar and you also have some blue, this card at the beginning of your Encore phase can shuffle a single bar from your grave back into your deck for an extra cancel. This effect like only exists one other place, and it's also in Summer Pockets. It's on a different card, and we'll talk about that when we get to the deck list. But if you are in blue and you're building and you're like playing a bar level 1, which is probably what most decks want to do, you can throw one of these in your deck and like you can add like a last ditch cancel into your deck. It also sits really big for, I believe, one turn cycle, or it swings in really big. I can bring that up too. There's a Kamome that has.
This was just a foil for the set 2 one.
Yeah, the set 2 one has a. There's a set 2 Kamome that's also in blue. It's an on-play normal heal, and then it has that same restriction as the Chiraha we just talked about, where you can pay one, ditch one to burn one. But because of the Summer Pockets restriction and stuff, that card has the same problems as the Chiraha. Ends up not seeing play. It is more playable than probably is given credit for, but if you have the slots for a auxiliary level 3 card and you're in blue, which is the same problem with this other Kamome that I just talked about that shuffles the bar back, you are probably going to play the Icy Tail every single time.
Yeah.
Which is the problem with not only this Kamome, but also that other Kamome that I forgot about. But probably the most important card on here for the new decks is this Miki we have in the center. Card is on play, draw 2, pick 2 cards from your hand, put it underneath this as markers, stock top.
Yep.
And then it also has, what I believe is ditch a card, give a character 2,000 power and a level on attack.
It's a soul.
A soul. Okay, 2,000 power and a soul.
It's a soul.
2,000 power and a soul. Okay, so you're going to help your Mikis get a reverse. Or is it only this card? I can't remember. This effect never comes up.
It's the Han Solo profile.
Han Solo.
So this is just itself.
Just itself. Okay. So you can get
so
extra power.
You have to get the character specifically.
Yeah, only a character. Okay. And then, but the most important effect on it is because it has those markers. Whenever that Biker Boy effect kicks from memory, you can use one of the markers to fulfill one of the stock costs of one instance of the effect. So if you have 2 Biker Boys, you can use one marker for one and one marker for another. You can't use both markers on one Biker Boy. But it is like one of your best third lanes for the Miki top end. And it also is a Miki, so if you only have one, it's another Miki down. But yeah, that's probably the most important card on here for the new builds.
It also is as a side note, it's also your only real form of draw if you're playing the Miki.
Yeah. Your only way to get into a climax, really, in that deck. Because in the other deck, you have Top Check X. When you're playing Miki, you're running all healers for the most part, outside of this card. Yeah. Alright, so moving on to the actual deck list. So think this is the one that I played the most for sure. This is Bar Choice. Incorporates all the things we talked about, all the strategies we talked about. That level 1, level 2 card, I usually choose the anti-change counter, but you can run pretty much anything in that slot that you want. That's your one flex spot. Rest of the list is pretty tight. I know Nico and I go back and forth on 2 or 3 Samugi Bonders. I always feel like I need one more. He always says it feels like it's too many.
I feel like there's actually a total of 3 flex spots in this specific list, just because I think 3 Rize is enough for me and 2 Bonder is enough for me. So that's kind of and then obviously you have the toss up for the sack counter. So that's kind of when I see this list, I'm those are kind of my 3 flex spots, but everything else is really, really tight.
Like we said, you need the Shizuku. That's the only one of in the deck. The way you play out your finisher turn, you'll be able to get this card if you need to do so. Or if you want to do so, it's usually never an issue.
I would almost just consider this as literally just part of your finisher combo a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So if you manage to grab a hold of this card from level 2 onwards, you just kind of hold it.
Yep. But yeah, I don't think we have to waste too much on this and the next deck we have here, which is Bardor, because we've sort of been talking about them the whole time here. I think the only card on here that we haven't talked about is the Kamome level X here, the 2/1, or with the umbrella. This card has a similar effect to that one we saw before, that blue level 3 Kamome that shuffles a bar back at the beginning of your Encore step. This one has that same effect, but it's just pay 2, shuffle a bar from your grave back into your deck. It can be shuffle pretty nasty. Bar from hand, yeah. But yeah, they're both bar from hand, actually, now that I think about it. So when you trigger bars, you can throw them back into your deck at any point after this card is down, which can be pretty good, especially if you think you've blind stocked something, or you're in a situation where you blind stock something and putting a cancel back would really help you out. So it's definitely not a throwaway second effect on a level X.
It all kind of depends on how you want to play it with your stock at that point. It's like, do you think maybe shuffling in an extra cancel is better for you? And then maybe sometimes, like, you're sitting at 4 stock at the end of turn. You can't use the tap counter, so then you just consider doing this because you also, like, triggered a gold bar the previous turn. So
yeah, for sure. I don't think there's anything else to talk about really with either of these.
There is a downside to this list that I do kind of want to mention, and that's ideally you want to try to get 2 biker boys into memory. I was initially only running 2, and that was obviously a little too low, just because you want to have that extra finisher kind of like reach potential.
Mm-hmm.
This can be a little awkward because you have a couple other effects kind of almost fighting for memory, if that makes sense. Because Biker Boy only goes to memory. It's a pay 1, sack itself, look at 3, go to memory if you have 2 or less memory. So at 0, we are kind of fighting for that with the Rize, but the problem is you kind of need the Rize for the additional kind of like deck speed and filter, especially on first deck. And then we are also fighting for memory with the Kamome Riki.
Yeah, so you really have to race. Run. Yeah. You have to... that was like my biggest thing outside of like the on reverse nature of the Miki that sort of drove me away from it, is that I have to play this card and I have to alter the way I play the game to like make sure this card is in memory. Like, thankfully you do have the clean cut to cut it back, which is the best part about running it. So it gets to attack and then go to memory instead of just like you having to play it down and go to memory. Which will be important when we talk about the last deck as well. But yeah, that was always a pain with this list as well.
Maybe somebody can figure out a better list than this, but I think like when I like try to play Bardoor, this is definitely my go-to list before any like tech options.
Yeah, I think mine looks like, again, like absurdly similar. I think it's just ratio changes.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm like down 1 Shiki early play, like up 1 Rize or something. Like not very different at all. But yeah, I think for these two, we pretty much went over everything as we went. So there's not much to say other than show you everything laid out. The last one that we didn't touch on as much, we talked about some of the cards. Pants Standby. So if you really like the way the old Summer Pockets deck played, with like Wind Standby, where you were fighting for board, like at level 1 and onward, sort of ride you into the very efficient old Standby finisher, which had a lot of potential for like damage modulation, stuff like that. This deck plays extremely similar to that deck, but is far more efficient and far less of a pain to play because you're not relying and dedicating slots to Shiroha. We have a similar lineup, but we're not running, obviously, the green stuff. We're running blue. So the eye memory, it has that same interaction like I just talked about with the Biker Boy. I can now attack in the front row, be clean cut to the back row, and then sent to memory to bond for the Owl finisher. And then we also have the deck bonder. You can run 3 or 4, whichever you'd like. 3 felt fine for me, that deck bonds to the Owl Shimakaze. Because we are in blue and because we are playing the Standby Finisher package, we get to jam 4 Azusas in our deck, which is awesome. We get to have like on-demand deck speed. And since we get this eye into memory really quickly with the clean cut, we don't have to worry about holding it in hand or doing something special with it. We can just throw it out there and just start ripping through our deck at level 1, even on our first level 1 turn sometimes, because it's also the same color as our Owl, which was Owl combo, which was always an issue with the old deck. If you were in a bad deck state where you'd like to play Azusa early, because you were trying to play Shiroha at level 1, it was yellow, you did not have that option, but now you do. We're a counter-based deck because we're trying to hold board with our Owl, so we're running 2 2Ks and one of this 1/1 counter. People read this card and always said it sucked, but this card is actually pretty good in this deck. You can search it off your Owl Shimakaze if you are thinking you're going to have to mill out your next turn, and then it fulfills your memory condition, throwing your eye into your memory so that you can use the Shimakazes you just searched to rip through your deck on the next turn. So it gives you that option, and while also being a counter that you can search to protect your Owls. We get to run the memory dump because we're not playing a lot of memory, so we get to run the Owl Shimakai, which is the memory dump, which is, I believe it's what both players, if they have 5 or more, they dump all the characters, or they keep 4.
They keep 5 or more, you just choose 4 cards you want to keep in memory, and then you dump it.
Yeah, so simultaneous, but like, or I guess that's not the right word, but You both do it, and then but you don't really care because you don't have enough memory for it to matter. And then we are running the old, pretty much basically the exact same package: the 2-2-1s, the 3-3-2s, the two 3-2 eyes that stand back up. We replaced Umi with the Shiki because we're not running the time package anymore, but it does basically the same thing. Still running 2 Icy Tails, and then we also threw in the Owl Bouncer because both good art and good effect.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky enough to have those pants SPs, please sell them to me. But yeah, I don't know. I think this deck, if you really did enjoy how the old deck played and you have your playset laying around and you still want to play that old standby combo, this really does feel like a better version of the old deck to a certain point. Because, like, I think we talked about it before, we could say that the Owl Shimakaze strategy, despite it being consistent, can sometimes feel a little fragile if you can't protect it. But in the same vein, Shiraha was also fragile if you couldn't protect her. So it's kind of the same, but you have more of a chance to recover from bad games.
Yeah. Notably here, I also kind of want to shout out the once again this fucking clean cut.
Yeah,
I feel like it's just randomly always the MVP, just because in this particular deck you have like 9 eligible clean cut targets at level 0 that you just all.
The entire right half of this top row.
Yeah, it's like if you clean cut the Brainstorm, you feel great. You clean cut the Eye, you feel great. You clean cut the Bonder to your combo, you feel great. Like, why is this? Thank you, Bushi. Thank you for
thank you for printing the one card that made all these decks work, and I'm sure it works in more decks than that we just have here. But even though this wasn't really the focus of our video, I talked about it with Nico. We wanted to include it because I think it's up there for like other builds because I think people were pretty hype on this Shimakaze as well when they saw it and how they were going to use this new package.
There's also other builds we didn't talk about that could have some potential, but initially, when I played against them, like I'll just make a reference to it. There was like an 8 standby list that didn't feel super super great. You're not really doing too much. It's like, yeah, cool, you have a money counter and you have tap counter, but you're doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
There's a couple other like random lists also running around, but the ones we covered here are mainly kind of like the ones we've seen primarily be played.
Yeah, I don't know if Pan Standby is as popular as we're making it out to be. I haven't seen it that much.
It's more of like a character favorite type of deck.
I guess
if you really like the Eye and the
characters. Yeah, Nico and I are pretty biased towards Al, so trying to make this deck work was a labor of love, like, in a way. As I also have to use these SPs I bought. These cards are too pretty to remain in a binder. But yeah, I think that's about it. Just to wrap up here, all of the links that we put at the ends of all our videos here on PGA Sports are up here. I'm not gonna get into it again. Go through at the end of every video. Thank you, Nico, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thanks for working with me back and forth on a bazillion different builds. I think it's like 2 or 3 Encore Decks links a day minimum since this set came out until like pretty recently of back and forth builds, tweaks, discussions, play testing. You guys came up to Pittsburgh. We did a lot of in-person play testing and back and forth. It's been a really cool experience working through and just sort of working on the deck. So I appreciate it.
Thank you too, Carmen. It's always nice to find somebody that really, really like gets into a set as much as you do. Because I think the last time I had this type of feeling was with Wibbs and Madoka.
Yeah,
stuff there.
It's like a real back and forth like improvement where you're both looking for like really want to tune that list and make it as good as it can be. Yeah, and it was really fun, really awesome. I'm excited to continue playing Summer Pockets. That feels pretty good. I think the general consensus when you talk to people, they do mention it as like one of the stronger sets in the meta. So we'll have to see how things shake out post ban list. See how that goes. Of course, I'm optimistic.
Like, solitaire sets.
Yeah.
That because at almost no point in the game do you kind of like care what your opponent's doing.
I would agree, 100%. Which is always strong in a tournament environment as well. So we'll have to see how the results go with I believe we have WGP coming for NA, and then of course like trios will start up for Japan like in the spring and stuff like that. And of course Japan results and things with post ban list. We have no idea how that stuff will shake out as it is. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. Any last shout outs for you, Nico?
Yeah, shout outs obviously to the Burn One channel. We make videos once every 2 months or something now. But
yeah, sometimes we
still
do.
have videos.
Sometimes we do. But yeah, I think that's it.
Shout outs to Carmen for having me here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Anytime. Yeah, I think that's it for me as well. So Pittsburgh White Sports signing off. We'll see you guys in the next one.